So today's book is The Art of Living by Grant Snider. I'll be talking with Grant, and I just wanted to share a page from the book. This is the future, and this is in the grand tradition of comic strips. It's just wonderful. Who knows where it will take us? Down a rabbit hole, across thin ice, over the abyss, through a virtual reality, straight into a bad joke, uncertain as it seems. We must keep moving forward. The future is waiting. So this is Henry Chamberlain. I'm going to be chatting with Grant Snider. He's a cartoonist with a loyal following of readers. He's known for The Shape of Ideas and I Will Judge You by Your Bookshelf. And his latest book is The Art of Living. Thank you so much, Grant, for doing this interview.
Yeah, thanks so much, Henry.
And as I was just saying to you before we started, we can cut over to the book. I'm going to just start with a question and see where that takes us.
Right.
So looking back on the previous two big books, The Shape of Ideas and I Will Judge You by Your Bookshelf, what led you to this book?
So each of those ones came out of a line of thinking in my weekly strips, where eventually I noticed some common threads between my incidental comics I post at least once a week. And I realized they were a lot of gravitating towards almost like this poetic sensibility more than my other ones. And some were just looking more inward and following like my own line of thinking, which when I took a step back, I realized, it's under that broad category of mindfulness, which is a buzzword now. I think that means a lot of things to a lot of people, but to me, it was just a lot of comics about being intentional about the way I was thinking, the way I was experiencing the world, and where I focused my attention.
I'm going to see if this will work here. I'm going to cut over to the book. Now, I thought I would just bring out the book and see where that might lead us. And I didn't really, sometimes it's better not to rehearse too much. I know where I want to go with this. For one thing, let me show you one of the two pagers that really just caught my eye, and I just love so much the types of light. I think it's one of those that's very poetic. There's nothing forced about it. It's very natural. Is that one that speaks to you? I know they're all your babies, so it's hard to say, huh?
No, when I look back at this one, it does it still has a lot of resonance, a few years later. And I like it because I kept the line pretty simple. Like, I think I drew it in marker instead of my usual pen, which got me a little bit different feeling. And then obviously the colors are a really big part of it. So yeah, the different line quality, the simple colors, almost like the childish rhyme, that one still speaks to me.
There's something that you might be able to share with us about the process of how these two pages came together? Or?
I remember it was for the Believer magazine. So I wanted to do like a spread instead of just a single page, which was always kind of fun to extend my thinking a little bit. But specifically how the comic itself came about, I don't have like I don't remember the zing or the aha moment that brought it, but like a lot of the ones that don't have my character walking through the panels, I'm really just kind of taking little pieces from my sketchbook. So the plant is, I had drawn it sitting in a cafe, actually probably either a cafe or like in my studio, I have a similar plant. The city car light was on a commute I used to have to work. And basically I take these little snippets from pages of my sketchbook and eventually try to connect them by rhyme or connect them by shape or imagery and build them into a broader comic.
Oh, that's great, because that's the sort of thing that your followers are curious about. You've got quite a sizable following on Instagram. That's one of the gauges people can turn to, over 100K in followers. So there's definitely people out there following what you're doing, enjoying what you're doing. And some of these are more detailed. Some of them translate really well to posters. I was over on your store. I know that you can actually turn a poster from just about anything that you do, which is quite remarkable that you offer that. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So it's an interesting design challenge when I'm thinking about the page, because I want it ideally to be, visible on a computer screen or now a phone screen. So it can't be like the most exquisitely detailed, finely shaded drawing ever, because I would just lose some of the effect. So it has to have some level of simplicity. But then since I want them to be in a book or maybe on somebody's wall in poster form, like there really has to be a visual element that translates to that large scale. So that's always this weird challenge for me, is how do I make something that can be zoomed way in on a phone if somebody may be checking it half-mindedly while they're at a stoplight, or seeing it online and be like, oh, I really love that on my wall or on the framed in my son or daughter's room. Let me see if I can get that as a poster. And I think sometimes it works, sometimes maybe not as much.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I think about the actual DNA of a comic strip, and that is certainly something that George Harriman, all these guys, Charles Schultz, they would all be thinking about these things. It would
Oh, yeah.
work for them. It would fit in because they're thinking, how can I make this more concise? How can I grab the audience? All those things.
And it's fascinating you mentioned George Harriman. So he was working probably at a huge scale, printed full page newspaper size, and Charles Schultz, not that many decades later, was shrunk down to a very tiny thumbnail size.
Yeah.
So they both had the exact same form, the newspaper comic strip, but hugely different constraints. And I love to study. I might get the name wrong. I think it's Sunday Press Comics, who does these amazing like reproductions of like Little Nemo and Slumberland and Gasoline Alley Sunday strips. And the books are basically the size of your torso. I don't know. They're huge.
Yeah.
So I love that you can see them at that scale, because something about the way that the artists were working back then really had to translate to that huge scale.
Now I'll just go through just a little bit more. And you do have your ongoing character, of course. Now that goes hand in hand with a cartoonist, that they have their alter ego. How did that character come about?
I think when I first started out, I didn't have any grand idea for like a cast of recurring characters. So I just kind of slid into that a little bit more of the self-referential, self-avatar character. And it seemed like a good way to get ideas from my actual life, but translate them, more to like a comic strip form. Put a little bit of creative distance from my autobiography and like the actual event, but still have that like personal feeling in it. So yeah, it just became like the easiest way for me to express whatever visual idea or broader idea I had in a strip form.
Now, how important is it for you? And I imagine it's very important, but at the same time, you might want to be modest and say, well, it's not that important, but your place within other cartoonists in the history of comics, you're pushing the limits of the art form. How those issues, how important are they to you?
Well, I see it less of like pushing or experimenting than there's this awesome tradition to borrow from. So I was mentioning those Gasoline Alley Sunday strips. I feel like that's like a blueprint for a lot of the pages in here. And I think 99.6% of comics readers have never seen them before. So I can borrow like a visual idea, like on this sledding page you're showing, the way you're taking a character moving through a big scene, but splitting it up panel by panel. That's directly taken from Frank King's Gasoline Alley, and probably some other cartoonists too. But yeah, I see it as like, okay, I'm in this line of amazing creators. Now I can use some of their best ideas, give it my own twist, and see what I come up with. And I think in a way, like cartooning should have more of that. Like I'm thinking of like jazz music or folk music or some other artistic disciplines where it's like, oh, you're referencing this person. Everybody knows when you're doing a cover song or like your own version of a certain traditional song. It'd be cool if there were a way to make those deeper connections within comics.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
If
there's
only
certainly
comics were more like playing music, right?
yes. Well, I think that's all going to become even more accessible, whatever way it happens.
Yeah,
I'm just
maybe that's
thinking,
more like seeking collaboration with another artist, or I don't know. The internet's an amazing place because you can see all the work being created immediately, 5 seconds after it's posted from across the world. So there's access to a lot of amazing stuff out there.
oh yeah. Well, I've been looking at incidental comics, and that's a wonderful thing that sort of took on a life of its own. Because I'm sure there's no way to know ahead of time I'm going to be doing this thing, and then over the years I'm going to become better, and then over the years I'm going to become awesome. And so there's the early work that's just
Right.
which is good, it's great, it gets better and better and better. I mean, that's a wonderful thing you've got there.
Yeah, it is. It's kind of crazy to go back on my, not that I recommend anybody do this, but go back to like 2009 on my website, incidentalcomics.com. And it looks like the work of a completely different person, which I guess in a way I was, but um, the double-edged sword part of that is if I go back and say, and find like this hugely creative time, like maybe it was, 6 years ago or something. And it's like, oh man, I was doing such great stuff then. What's happened now if I'm having a frustrating week? So it's cool to see how far I've come, but also realize, oh, there's all these patches of like hugely creative moments that are really hard to replicate again and again.
Yeah.
So just don't read your old work. That's my recommendation to artists everywhere.
Now, when I'm curious about that place that you can go to, because you've got Instagram, of course, where you're updating, but then you also have incidental comics. Are you thinking now in terms of material that's going to eventually be in the next book and its ongoing series of books, or how do you approach what you post?
Before, I haven't really thought that way, but now I realize, oh, it almost seemed like a fluke that I got The Shape of Ideas published. And now I realize, okay, I'm 3 books into these comics collections, there's hopefully gaining more readership, and maybe it's something I could just keep doing. And I love the editor I work with, Charlie Kochman at Abrams. He's just great to bounce ideas off of and shape the books together. So I have been a little more intentional about, okay, maybe this is a line of thinking for the next book. Maybe these strips would fit together as a theme. Maybe I should pull back on these other things that don't really fit. But sometimes that like big picture thinking is not actually helpful to my like daily creative process. It's almost better when I just sit down, choose the best idea, and follow where it goes. And a few years later, when it's time to come up with another book again, jumble them all together in an interesting order.
Yeah.
I am starting my first like book of comics that is actually on a theme, and it's planned, that I haven't had existing strips to build from, which is called Poetry Comics for Kids. And so it's going to be kind of similar to some of the strips in The Art of Living, but geared towards a younger readership and explicitly poems in comic form. So I'm pretty excited about that.
Now, it seems like to me that you're like in the perfect place. You have a wonderful quote unquote day job, which you enjoy, and actually is like a grounding for you. You've got an amazing editor, Charlie Kochman, if I'm pronouncing that right. Kochman?
Kochman, yeah.
Kochman, sorry. Charlie Kochman. And you have all these options. You could pursue books, or you could maybe hold off, or you could pursue a particular theme, or you could hold off, or whatever. But you're living the life, I guess is what I'm saying, aren't you?
A busy life, but yeah, it's great. I have no complaints.
So what could you maybe share with us about the making of a book, about working with Abrams, about working with Charlie?
I think for this specific book, it was pretty soon after I Will Judge You by Your Bookshelf was published. And we had a phone call to kind of discuss, okay, what's the next project going to be? And I kind of hinted, or maybe flat out said, I really have no idea. I don't feel like there's enough for a book anywhere. Like, maybe I wasn't that negative about it, but I left the conversation feeling like, oh, I had these two pretty good ideas for book collections. Now there's all these loose ends that I don't know how to bring together. And then maybe a couple of days later, I realized, oh, this idea of mindfulness and reflection and inward thinking was it. It's just I just hadn't really seen that before. And so I got excited about it. Charlie liked the idea. We came up with a proposal, and then a lot of that ended up being printed in this book you're seeing in front of you.
Now, there's a certain wit about your work, and I wouldn't say it goes too far in irony, but it doesn't go too far in over sincerity. It's like it's just right. Like, how would you how would you describe your sense of humor?
I mean, yeah, I think you said it well. Like, one analogy I thought of, which is similar to kind of a comic strip from this book, is like, my take on the broader topic of mindfulness is like walking down the block with a 3-year-old. So you have on the one hand this perfectly like focused creature that your 3-year-old son or daughter or grandson or another child close to you you're watching, who you're seeing experience the world in this amazing way, and they're taking everything in. They're stopping to look at every leaf or rock or stick, and they're just totally present. And then me as this grown-up person, I'm like wanting to check my phone, or maybe see if somebody emailed me about a book thing, or maybe somebody bought a poster. I'd really like to get home and get a snack or get off this walk eventually. But so there's that like purely optimistic, sincere side, and this purely like negative, pessimistic, oh, this is a waste of time side. But I feel like my ideal balance of myself is somewhere in the middle, where I like slow down enough to like look at this. Okay, this part of nature, this thing around me is really cool. I need to take time out of my sort of curmudgeonly self to experience it more deeply. And I think there's still always that little thing pulling me towards like irony or a bit of sarcasm or finding the humor in it. But yeah, drawing that balance between this pure openness and this slight annoyance of the world is kind of the balance I think a lot of these strips strike.
I can imagine one or two comic strips from what you just said.
Or maybe a children's book, yeah.
Oh goodness, I don't want to lose my train of thought. Okay, I'm kind of wrapping up, because you've been so generous with taking the time out towards the end of a day. You want to get back to your stuff, but and I'm very self-conscious. What is it that fans would want me to ask? And this is a very esoteric question. I can't help but want to ask it. And there's so many ways to ask it, about the universal truths that you're playing with. And everybody has that aha moment. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm thinking. That sensation, like the best comics, comedians, they do that on stage. People that they recognize your thoughts are their thoughts. And this is like one of those big idea questions. What does it all mean, Grant? I mean, is it good? Is it good that we're all more or less the same? I think that's great. I mean, but in the hive mind, that has its pros and cons. What right. thoughts? What thoughts does that inspire for you?
Well, I think it's nice because in creating something, sometimes I'll be like, oh, this is kind of weird, or like this is coming from maybe a deeper part of myself than I would share actually in a conversation with a friend. Do I really want to put this on paper? Like, are people just going to not respond to it? And invariably, those are the ones that get the most response. People are like, oh, you read my mind. And I'm like, really? I thought that was just a really specific quirk of my mind. So I think that's kind of heartening in a way, that we're all kind of strange, unique people in a universal sort of way. We're all weird.
Yeah.
But I think if I try to play to that and be like, oh, let me come up with this idea that everyone's going to respond to, this will be really appealing and really universally resonant. Well, if I try to back into it that way, that's when you get a strip that probably didn't make this book, because I threw it out and decided it was so generic as not to apply to anyone. So that's another balance. You mentioned between the irony and sincerity, the balance between the personal and the universal, and trying to strike that is really challenging. But I feel like when it works, that makes the best art form in comic strips or music or movies or whatever.
Oh, well, that's a perfect place to start to wrap things up. This is the book, The Art of Living, and I want to ask you, as I'm maneuvering my way over to my other camera, if I is there anything else that you might want to bring up? Any other any closing thoughts?
No, I'm just happy the the book's getting into the hands of people, and in the next month or so, it's kind of exciting. Every new book feels like a new challenge and opportunity to share my work, and I'm just really honored to get to do it.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Grant.
Yeah, thanks, Henry. It's been fun.